Good afternoon. I'm Thomas Shaw, and welcome to our ongoing series, This Great Lent, a Catechism of the Orthodox Church according to the Old Testament. Today we're continuing with Isaiah. We'll be discussing Isaiah for a few days. There's a lot going on here. Isaiah is really essential to any understanding of the relationship between the Old and New Testaments, because Isaiah really establishes what we consider the messianic prophecies, prophecies of a Messiah. And we discuss how Messiah, on one level, means the current king of Judah, because every king of Judah was anointed and were successors of David. But it's with the writings of Messiah that the idea of some future idealized Messiah uh, starts to take focus. Of course, we began this series looking at Numbers in the Torah, where we found a prophecy of how the Lord would. We found both the Trinity and the Incarnation in that passage, and how these things go back clear into the time before the Israelites came into the Promised Land, these prophecies. And yet, when we're dealing with material such as Isaiah, and we have our study Bibles and so forth, we'll probably come across things that seem a little confusing, because scholars these days increasingly date everything in the Old Testament to a period in which we have very little information, the Persian period, following the Babylonian exile, the return. The Persians take over what was once the Assyrian and then the Babylonian empires, and they're followed by the Greeks. Well, in between Assyria, Babylon, and the Greeks, we have the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, and not much more than that. And into this black hole, scholars decide to locate the bulk of the Old Testament being written then, because they have a theory that the idea of a future Messiah king who would usher in some kind of a messianic age, a golden age, and this was connected with the idea of the last day, is a late development. So they use a circular reasoning here. Whereas those of us who believe that these events that are counted in the Scripture are real, that God does reveal Himself, that God did reveal Himself to Moses, that the Israelites were a real people, even in the Bronze Age. These ideas, because of a lack of evidence other than the Bible, because this point of view doesn't consider anything in the Bible to be believable. We see a different sequence. So there's no reason for us to, when looking at Isaiah, to conclude that most of it was written after the Babylonian exile. Now, there are, as we mentioned, a few glosses or passages here and there that obviously refer to events after Isaiah, and so the book was edited and maybe reconceptualized for a later audience. That we can accept, I would think. But the idea that there's just a few scraps of information in the book of Isaiah that might be from Isaiah, and it's all a novel written a century or more later, is not a conclusion that I can endorse, nor would any Orthodox Christian. Now but still we're using the division that has been used in studies of the book of Isaiah to organize our material, and we did the introduction up through chapter 6 of the first part of Isaiah, which is called First Isaiah or Proto Isaiah. the part that's considered to have authentic Isaiah material by scholars, although increasingly they're even backing away from that. We see very similar things happening in studies of Jesus as well. And that's to remove the history from all of this. None of this is real, but I don't think we Orthodox Christians are going to buy into that point of view at all. So I'm going to go through the remainder part of First Isaiah. We read about his commission. The early parts of the book of Isaiah read very similarly to Amos, and the rest of this first section of Isaiah has similar kinds of prophecies against the nations and many other things, but has something new, and we want to look at that. And that is the idea of a relationship between a idealized Messiah and the actual Messiah. By actual Messiah, I mean the living King, and that there is a program that the Messiah King, the King of Judah, should be following, and Isaiah appears to be very much on board with this new program and a supporter of that program under Hezekiah. And Hezekiah was a great reforming king. It says in the book of Chronicles that basically the temple was practically in disrepair and unused when he first became king, and he had it reconsecrated. He celebrated the Passover in Jerusalem for the first time in years. He sent out runners all over Israel in the north, whatever people were still left, I guess, after the Assyrians have been through, inviting them all to Jerusalem. And so there's a renewal of the temple, a destruction of items in the temple that felt to be accretions from Syrian worship or other kinds of non-Israelite worship, and also going out into the hinterlands and beginning the process of destroying other places of worship which were not under control of the central government. So here we have in Hezekiah the beginning of a centralization and control mechanism to ensure that the worship of the Lord is carried on correctly. And to do this, at first, it must all be supervised within Jerusalem. So Hezekiah begins this kind of a program. We're going to read some passages, and I'm going to interpret them as being prophecies about his own time, about the birth of Hezekiah. But these passages we use to as prophecies of the birth of Christ, because Hezekiah, being this great reforming king who followed what the Lord wanted, is a type of Christ who establishes proper law and proper rule. So we begin in chapter 7 with the heart of, really this is considered to be the heart of the whole section 1 through 39. Moreover, the Lord added this to Ahaz. Ahaz is the father of Hezekiah, saying, ask a sign for yourself from the Lord your God. Ask it either in the depth or in the height above. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, nor will I tempt the Lord. Then Isaiah said, hear now, O house of David. Is it a small thing for you to weary men, but will you weary the Lord also? Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and you shall call his name Emmanuel. So, Emmanuel meaning God is with us. Butter and honey he shall eat before he knows to prefer evil or choose the good. For before the child knows good or evil, he refuses the evil to choose the good. And the land you fear because of the presence of the two kings will be abandoned. So we're not going to get into what that last little bit means. Has to do with the historical situation that this is all a part of. But what we have here is that the sign given to Ahaz is that his wife, who's the virgin, and this is something that we've been able to reconstruct, looking carefully at the text, not me, but scholars, that that the city itself, of any city, was called the Virgin, but also that because the king became the son of God, his actual mother was considered to be a virgin, not literally, but was given this title. So the virgin is the wife of Ahaz, who will give birth to Hezekiah. So the conception of Hezekiah is the sign of that God gives Ahaz. And then in the next section, another verse that we're all pretty familiar with is the birth announcement. It's in chapter 9. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder. His name will be called the Angel of Great Counsel. For I shall bring peace upon the rulers, peace and health by him. Great shall be his government, of his peace there is no end. His peace shall be upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order and establish it with righteousness and judgment. From that time forward and unto the ages of ages, the zeal of the Lord of hosts shall perform this. So we can see in this imagery how what we might call eschatological end time type language is mixed in, because it perhaps wasn't completely understood yet that there would be a future definitive Messiah, but that the rule of the Davidic kings itself was God's way of ultimately flowing out from Jerusalem the whole world with his law. Not everyone would have already been foreseeing what was going to happen. So we have to look at things both from the mentality of the time and from the mentality of later times. So this is the conception of Hezekiah / Messiah. He's a Messiah, and the idealized Messiah, and the birth of Hezekiah, and accounts of the idealized Messiah. We get even more of the rule of the idealized Messiah here in chapter 11. There shall come forth a rod from the root of Jesse. Now, Jesse, you recall, is David's father, ancestor, and a flower shall grow out of his root. The Spirit of God shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and godliness. The Spirit of the fear of God shall fill him. He shall not judge by reputation, nor convict by common talk, but he will judge the cause of the humble and reprove the humble of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the word of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall slay the ungodly. He shall gird his loins with righteousness and cover his sides with truth. Okay, so here we have, we're talking about that this is the ideal king, the ideal Messiah. We have we understand when we hear this, that these are prophecies applied to Jesus, but in their first instance, they're being applied to Hezekiah. That from his restoration of the temple, his renewal of the religion, that now things would roll forth as they should. Of course, they didn't, but we'll get to that later. The wolf shall feed with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, and the calf, the bull, and the lion shall feed together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze together, and their young ones shall lie down together. The lion and the ox shall eat straw together. The nursing child shall play with the hole of asps, and the weaned child shall put his hand in the den of asps. They shall not hurt nor be able to destroy anyone on my holy mountain, for the whole world shall be filled with the knowledge of the Lord, as much water covers the seas. It shall come to pass in that day that there shall be a root of Jesse, who shall arise to rule nations. The Gentiles shall hope in him, and his resting place shall be honorable. So some of these things are obviously a poetic imagery about peace. It's not in the nature of beasts to quit killing one another. So in any real world, other than some next idealized world, we wouldn't expect to see these kinds of phenomena. But these are the kinds of poetic descriptions that are applied to the idealized rule of the Davidic kings as the law of God rolls out to the Gentiles. And this idea of the law of God rolling out to the Gentiles, which is a major theme of all parts of Isaiah, is picked up particularly in a couple of verses. I picked these up because I believe they're read in the church on the eve of February 2nd, which is the Ipapandi, the presentation of the Lord in the temple. This little section is read because the Lord's about to go to Egypt. See, this is the context, how this passage is being used, because the Lord, after his reception in the temple by Simeon, went to Egypt. In that day there will be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the country of Egypt, and a pillar of the Lord at its border. It will be a sign forever to the Lord in the country of Egypt, for they will cry to the Lord because of their oppressors, and the Lord will send them a man who will save them. So we have a very strong soteriological idea here in the Septuagint. He will judge and save them. Then the Lord will be known to the Egyptians, and that day the Egyptians will know the Lord and offer sacrifices. Yes, they will make vows to the Lord and pay them. So this is a complete overturning then of the story of the Exodus, the opposite of the Exodus, the return into Egypt and the conversion of Egypt as one of the hallmarks of the conversion of the Gentiles under the Messiah. I'm just going to pick up a couple more passages, and tomorrow we'll move on to the so-called second Isaiah, which has many, many beautiful passages in it. But this is a well-known, this little couple of verses on apostasy here is well known because of its importance to Jesus' own ministry. So the Lord said, "These people draw near to me and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me, and they worship me in vain, teaching the commandments and doctrines of men. Therefore, behold, I will proceed to remove this people, and I shall remove them. I shall destroy the wisdom of the wise and hide the understanding of the intelligent. Woe to those who deepen their counsel, but not through the Lord. Woe to those who take counsel in secret, whose works are in darkness. They say, 'Who sees us? And who knows us, or what we do?'" So this is an idea that people think they can hide things from the Lord, that they can acquire secret knowledge that the Lord isn't aware of. This is a theme that's gone into in other parts of the Bible, the idea that